Hi, happy Monday, and welcome back to the behind the scenes of the One Take Wonder podcast with me, Alexia. I think I figured out my issues from last week, or we shall see. So I'm really excited for this week's topic. I'm excited to record, and also I feel like a ballerina. I don't know, the ballerina core fashion that came back. Did I only do ballet until it was like 9 and I was never particularly good at it? Yes. Do I still feel like that aesthetic as like a former... See, I'm not even showing you guys my hands because they're not that great. Like, I'm sure they're not making the, whatever. A former ballerina. Yes, also that. It's my world. We're all living in it, but let's just set up the tech. I have a new microphone today because I don't know what's going on with my old mic, but it has just decided to no longer want to cooperate. It's no longer with us. So I thought I would show off the cuteness of my outfit before immediately concealing myself behind, cameras, or not cameras, microphones and headphones. And boop. Let's make sure that's fully plugged. And give it a second. Wow, I feel like I'm going to say something. This feels so official, like podcast mic setup. I feel like I'm going to say something really crazy right now. Oh, now you're not spun all the way. Perfect. You're on the correct setting. And now just waiting for my computer to recognize it. 1 second. Are we ready, computer? Do you want to work? Input device. No, it totally does. Oh, because I didn't plug in the bottom. Wow. And I know these tech support issues is truly why you're here with me today. For this, right now. Okay. It's March. We are finally out of the winter months. I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania, so truly winter doesn't really end until like mid-April, but for me, yes, we are out of the winter, and I don't know, there's something so transformative about March. I've been thinking about doing Lent. You're like, Alexia, you don't believe in God. True, but I do like the meditation aspect. I do like giving something up. I do like dedicating myself to tasks. It feels good. I'm looking forward to it, like a spring equinox sort of thing. Do I know when the spring equinox is? No, and that's not really relevant. Let me just check that this audio is working. Okay, actually we don't need to do that. Okay, last week's sound was so bad. Like when I played that back, I cried. I did a lot of crying because that was so stressful. Okay, let's get into the podcast. What was I saying? Spring, equinox. Where was I going? Oh, right. And yeah, I just thought, a little brief chit chat. I am so sorry for last week's sound issues. I don't know what caused them. Truly, I don't know how to tell you this. Like, I bought a brand new laptop. I was rocking with it, brand new MacBook. What could go wrong? My old mic just decided that it didn't ever want to adapt to the new laptop. So now we're on a new microphone. Huzzah for that. The sound issues should be a lot better, but let me know if there's something that needs improvement and I'll take a look at it again. But I could not have uploaded that sound audio to the pod. It was terrible. Like, thank God that I actually do record this on my camera, even if it sounded a little more echoey than usual. What did I want to, I don't know, it was a bit frivolous last week, and so I thought maybe I should talk about something serious. Maybe I should focus on something's real. And so I thought I would kind of revisit the loneliness series that I started with last spring. I did part 1 and 2, and then I think I kind of talked about it again in the, very Lana Del Rey meandering title. I find the Your Birth vlog particularly unsettling, or no, I find your birth vlog unsettling, particularly in the context of you not wanting to talk to people in grocery stores. I think that's how it is, because it reflected more on loneliness and the specific thing that people are turning on their cameras to talk to an audience that they know they can like manufacture a certain type of response, as opposed to interacting with their real life circle. And I think that you have to acknowledge that the phenomena is obviously overrepresented by people who want to turn on their camera. Like, some people truly live in isolation, and I don't think it's fair to be like social media is the complete cause, although there's a lot of research to support that. I'm not saying that like every person in the world, when they don't have a real person to talk to, immediately turns to a platform like TikTok. I'm just saying that as a person who spends a significant amount of time, I'm trying to cut it back, not as much, but still a decent amount of time on TikTok, especially because right now I am currently tuned into the story of an Atlanta stripper who is revealing everything about Future. And in a way that's like surprising, and it's not surprising that he, you know, has a harem of women that he deals with, because he has like a dozen children. And I've said this since I was in high school, but I think Future has a personality disorder, not in like a disparaging way. I just think anyone who listens to his lyrics could be like, yeah, there's something wrong with him. He does not conceptualize like shame, embarrassment, decency, or empathy, and the way that makes him in a way similar to anyone else, in a way that's quite disordered, in a way that's not, it's definitely cluster B. Do I think he's a narcissist? Probably. I think that's the closest to what you can call it. I mean, I think any man who runs around serially breeding and serially impregnating, like, something is wrong with them. That is not normal. And then especially to not have any hand in raising those children, although I do think you can get to a point where like you could be the most wannabe involved parent, but you simply cannot take care of that many children and give them all the same emotional like love and nurturing and support. That's just as important as having the financial support from your parents, right? Like, that was always my thing about the Duggars. I used to like to watch, you know, what was it, like 19 Kids and Counting when it first came on TLC, before the darkness of the Duggars really got exposed. Which isn't, I don't enjoy those rabbit holes. I feel like getting really into fundamental like Christianity influencer snark is the same type of woman who, like, she would have gotten into true crime, but she has ethical implications about true crime. And so she decides to get really into talking about how like multi-level marketing schemes, aka MLMs, are extremely harmful, which they are, or getting really into like Christian fundamentalism and those consequences on influencers like mommy bloggers, and also like fundy snark. And it's a hard rabbit hole to go down because it requires you to absorb so many J names, so much information. What was that? Oh, but back to the Duggars. You could always tell that Michelle Duggar, like, in addition to the obvious that the oldest girls were raising the rest of the kids, you could always tell that she'd kind of given up on like emotionally nurturing them after like kid 6, maybe kid 9. Like, the rest of them, the mom that they knew, like, that's just their older siblings who were raising them. This is all in a roundabout way to get to the fact that I don't know, I'm still thinking about that Wally video a lot, the one that I talked about like the idea for a couple weeks ago, and how we can essentially just manufacture our realities. Like, I talked about it a lot starting in a past episode, The Moles Are Watching Us, then going on towards algorithms like flatten our experiences. But I think a lot of people are simply engaging with the internet because it is more comforting than engaging in real world pushback and contradictions. You can say something incredibly, oh, is something going on with the camera footage? Wait, what does that mean? Okay, I think there's something going on with the camera, which is not great, which the show must go on. We'll see how this works. Incredibly grating and obnoxious that somebody in real life would probably clock you for. But on the internet, you can get manufactured interest, right? The other day I was having a conversation with a friend and she was really trying to like big me up for having a platform, which is incredible, and I don't take it for granted, but it's hard to develop an ego over it because you have to remember that like any idiot on the internet can get famous. And I don't mean that in a way to disparage myself, it's just always a good check that like you can truly succeed on any corner of the internet. You just have to find whatever particular corner you want to be. Like a lot of people think that you can only succeed being some sort of like Alex Earl, huge influencer type, and you can totally find your niche. Just depending on how vile you want to be or finding the people who want to talk about what you want to talk about. Like it is. So my camera died in the course of filming. My camera died. So I've been waiting for my camera to charge enough. I'm going to admit this now because I think enough time has passed. If you're wondering the real reason why it took me so long between my like winter hiatus to come back, it's because I promised to come back with a YouTube component and then realized just how difficult that would be to execute. So do I care that it is extraordinarily past my bedtime and I'm doing this? No, because this is for the 30 people that like and comment. Thank you so much. I'm not saying I have favorites. I'm just saying maybe I appreciate you more than anyone else. When this camera died, I was talking about loneliness. But in the course of sitting around and scrolling while doing my red light therapy on my surgical scar, I happened across the video of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande performing Defying Gravity at the Oscars. And something has changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through with playing by the rules that I set 9 minutes into this footage. I'm talking about Wicked again. Okay, maybe I'll get back to the loneliness, but I just have a couple more things to say about Wicked. Just some small, insignificant things to say. Just some predictions, okay? At this point, you've already heard me break it down. So here are some things that I want to see. I want to see more analyses of Fiyero's character because Fiyero sort of gets, and this is massive spoilers for part 2, I feel like at this point, if you haven't figured out how to bootleg the entire musical on YouTube or look up the plot on Wikipedia, like maybe dip off now. But Fiyero is sort of given the same edit in Wicked that Glinda is given, right? Where we're supposed to see her as the sympathetic character, even though in the real world context, someone like Glinda who continues to align with a fascist regime. And to be clear, she's not just a normal citizen who's like trying to get by in the fascist regime. She like actively takes a role in this extremely oppressive government persecuting her friend because it helps her get ahead. Like at no point was she ever a good person worth emulating or looking up to. She has always been an opportunistic, scheming, backstanding bitch who threw the flame on the, I believe the word is effigy, of her best friend. And Elphaba never would have done that to her. And Fiyero sort of gets the same cast that, you know, after they leave Shiz, after Elphaba is persecuted, the timeline of that is kind of ambiguous in the musical. He becomes a cop to look for her, right? There's a different name for it in Oz, but he essentially becomes a law enforcement official who goes on these quests to attempt and find Elphaba. And there just had to be a better way. There had to be a better way. Like, I hope in the same way that the movie takes on the stance of exploring why Glinda's character felt so comfortable throwing Elphaba under the bus, why Fiyero chose that path of resistance. And there's so much more that we'll talk about when part 2 comes out. Oh my God, later this year in November, so terrible. But yeah, that's always been a big point of contention for me in Fiero's character and that he didn't attempt to correct the narrative about Elphaba more. Like, a lot of people passively sat around and watched by while she continued to do much of nothing. And I think the only person who was really overt about how evil she was Nessa, which I'm so devastated. They can't include Nessa's song, like the Wicked Witch of the East, on the soundtrack. Oh my god, the camera is dying again. On the soundtrack, because it gives too much of the plot away. But wow, am I excited to see that. Almost, like, I think the first thing I'm most excited about is No Good Deed, because Cynthia Erivo is just going to blow that out of the water. But then second is Nessa Rhodes singing The Wicked Witch of the East. I just, chills all over my body. I am now racing against the camera. And also got away from the point that I wanted to make about loneliness. And then, you know, of course I don't take any notes on what I'm doing. It's really all gotten away from me. Maybe we'll come back next week. If it was really that profound or worth talking about for 30 minutes, you know what? I actually think it would have come back to me now. Matthew says hello for everyone that's interested. Okay. Pause. Oh my god, this camera's gonna die. This is gonna be augmented footage. I don't know, people watch vlogs, so like I feel like maybe people would be interested or care about watching this. Okay. I'm sorry, I got so distracted by Wicked. It's so good that I was just listening to the entire Okay. Right, so I was trying to make the point that the internet allows you to get away with completely antisocial behavior that would otherwise get you cussed out or excommunicated in real life. And I think the best example of this is a situation between like two influencers, Hallie Kate, and I'm just gonna call her the Ginger, because honestly that girl does not, I think she trolls the internet for any mention of herself. But essentially, to give you the rundown, and I'll get into why I'm talking about this, there is an influencer, and I like the podcast that she has with Jazz. It's like easy listening to do if I'm working at like a, I don't know, so I like to listen to something while I'm drafting at work, but I don't necessarily want to be listening to something that's like super complicated, and I don't mean that in a shady way. Like, I just like to listen to background chatter sometimes, and I'm always thoroughly entertained by what they have to say. But this girl, Hallie, had a boyfriend, Reed, and she went very public with her relationship, as she goes public with just about everything going on in her life. And she publicizes their breakup. Then she goes to an influencer event, she meets Little Ginger. She invites Little Ginger back to her apartment, and then she finds out that that Little Ginger actually went on a date with Reed, her ex-boyfriend, and it turns out that the Ginger had DM'd him shortly after talking to Hallie and finding out that he was now freshly single. They only go on one date. From what I understand, like nothing, like nothing really happened beyond that first date, and then they get back together. And so the Little Ginger continues to crash out. She makes her whole entire platform talking about, how this breakup has affected her. And I will say that she did get hate sent her way, because I think it's a pretty scummy thing to do. Like, there is a certain type of woman who is just obsessed with getting a man who's still in the company of other women, like a freshly single for 28, 48 hours, who hasn't even done the exchange of like getting your stuff back or like having those final conversations with exes. Like, yes, he's single in title only, but he's not completely untangled from that girl. And I think it's the same kind of allure that would push you to, going after a man who's already completely taken. So she continues to make, anyway, this situation, and I guess this is the most relevant, this situation occurred almost 2 years ago, and she's still talking about it now, and it's extremely frightening. When I was a freshman in college, my first semester, I had a stalker. I'm not particularly interested in unpacking that like online or on the podcast ever, because it did take me a couple years to reconcile with the fact that that actually was traumatic. But it made me very attuned to the behaviors that other women can enact towards other women, because I was stalked by a girl my age who lived on my dorm, and how I guess society blurs that. Like, a lot of people didn't realize what was happening or recognize it for the harm that it was, until it had already completely escalated in severity. But then also, like, learning that and trying to educate yourself about how to prevent stalking in the future and all those issues just kind of makes you attuned of recognizing that, like, little trait in other people and the attitude that the little ginger is perpetuating against Hallie Kate. If this was happening on a college campus, in high school, if this was happening at a community, rec center or a pottery class or some sort of gathering where this was not happening through the gauze of, like, the entertainment on your screen, because people do not register content creators as actual human beings, right? They register them as sources of entertainment first and a person second, which makes sense because the people who are on your phone, the phone people, it's fine not to feel like they are, I mean, it's not fine, but I guess it is what it is to feel like they're not a human being in the same way that someone who's in front of you is a human being. But I think that tends to mask a lot of really unstable and fucked up behaviors, and people who want to engage in, like, extremely troubling, extremely antisocial behaviors can really thrive online. Obviously, I am not the first person to point that out. It just disturbs me every time I see it, because again, if this little ginger girl was stalking and harassing Hallie, in real life like this, people would call it what it is, a very weird obsession, something that is never ending. She continuously talks about this girl's boyfriend. She continuously talks about this girl. And it's very much not about the man at the issue of this all read. It's really all about Hallie. I think she had some weird sort of thing for or against her prior to this. And like I've always maintained, being a side chick is just as much about being the other woman and, like, the allure of the other woman, whether you know her or can identify her or not, as much as it is getting that man who you think is the prize, who's only a prize because of the caliber of woman that you're jealous of or in awe of or want to prove that you're better than, and he's connected to, right? But I think about that all the time when I see these influencers who, like, their whole thing is to crash out and argue with people all day. And it's like, right, not just in real life would somebody beat your ass for that. In real life, we would clock that as frightening. And so it becomes entertainment. It gets disguised as, like, normal, and it shifts what interactions would be like. Like, I always think about the fact that in real life, if you told someone, I never want to talk to you again, and then you cut off all means for that person to contact you, you blocked them, from calling you, you got some sort of order from them finding you at your home or at your place of business, where you like to spend your leisure time, and then they showed up anyway, we would recognize that as a huge boundary violation that is very indicative of the instability of that person. And we would take that as a threat. But if someone blocks you online and then you continue to make content about them and talk about the fact that they blocked you, you can go viral, because you can also get a bunch of people who engage in, like, disenfranchising, kind of disturbing behavior to cash in on this dogpiling. And the one thing that this little ginger has been able to do is to build her own platform and monetize herself off of this particular type of I'm going to call it social violence and dogpiling, because it's entertainment to people. People are not clocking that, like, this is really disturbing behavior. And so they think it's more of just, like, a stupid little internet feud. And I think, one, it has to be incredibly scary for Hallie, who I think has responded to this with nothing but kindness and grace. And like I said, I really liked her and Jazz's friendship before, but I gained a newfound respect that every time, Sophia, I wish I knew how to edit that out. The little ginger one, like, mentions her, she draws attention to be like, let's cash out some teacher's Amazon wish list. Like, here's how I'm using the revenue that oh no, Matthew, don't get on the computer, from this situation for good and I'm donating it. And she's really just a class act, but because it's seen as entertainment, a lot of people are also transferring over like Sophia's harassment. Like one of my earliest podcast episodes, I talked about how people like Blueface and other men sort of outsource their abusive behaviors by making it entertaining to go harass their victims. She's doing the same thing. A lot of people online engage the same thing. I don't think there's anything. Well, I think you're not responsible for if you talk about someone and then your audience goes and, you know, says something to them. There is a line that you have to be conscious of, and there is a way that you, I think, mitigate that harm and that situation. And I do think it's the creator's responsibility. What percent is my camera at? Oh boy. To sort of lessen the harm against people like that. I don't know. Again, it's something that I ruminate on as someone who survived stalking. Might be too dramatic, but as someone who was affected by that, and especially in a situation where the stalking was not taken super seriously because it was coming from another girl and because it was coded as like, well, she just wants to be you, or like it's a jealousy thing, or maybe she's secretly in love with you, which was, I don't know. It's kind of like when boys pull your pigtails at recess and then the teacher is like, it's just because he likes you, and he's like, okay, well, if he likes me, like, don't you think he would be nice? Like, don't you think you're just kind of setting me up for a lifetime of accepting violence from men and coding that as love? Separate discussion for a separate day. But because I only exist to so many people online, I am just very involved, I guess, in thinking about those online implications on real life and the way that completely antisocial behaviors have taken over. And because I talked about other iterations of that, of trying to stay alone and loneliness, you know, and again, like, you are adopting these antisocial stances from people who would kill to have the community and family and friends. You are also being persuaded into these dangerous means of behavior by people who have otherwise been excommunicated by everyone else in real life. Like, that is as much of a danger that you start to adopt these abusive behaviors, these disturbing behaviors, these behaviors where you feel emboldened to go harass random influencers because they don't seem like people to you. They're just phone entertainers. Oh my goodness, I can feel myself. I'm allergic to cats. I'm allergic to my beautiful, darling, precious Matthew. And every so often, an allergic reaction flares up. Okay, we're running out of time until my eyes start to swell shut. Racing against the clock. And also racing against this dying camera. Yeah. It rankles me. It feels so vulnerable to be talking about why I guess this has always bothered me so much. And then I've shared this story before, but like, some of the worst experiences that I've had is not just like the faceless accounts on TikTok being like, oh, you're ugly, whatever. You can never convince me of that. But it's people with platforms who decided to use their platform to unfairly get people to engage in like this cyber vigilance after I had already blocked them and I had already set that thing of like, you know, you can't find me anymore. And now you're having your audience do that for you. And it's like, wow, if this was real life, if I told you, you know, don't come around my house anymore and you just got your homegirls driving by my house, like, we would recognize that as frightening or something not to be a part of. This was a very roundabout way and maybe not the perspective on loneliness that you might have thought we were going into at the beginning of this. But I still think it's important nonetheless. And I just don't think, again, because I am an internet person to you, like, you know, most of you guys, 99.9% of you guys don't know me in real life. Although I would love to meet you. If you ever want to say hi, you totally can. But yeah, it's something that I'm just very hyper vigilant on. I think it's something you have to think about, not just because you always run the risk of like being doxxed, but also just because you run the risk that someone could use the veneer of the internet to unleash their personal manifesto against you in a way that is incredibly frightening and a threat to your safety. And I feel bad for her. I think she's handled it the best that she can. Oh my goodness, Matthew, please stop. The obsession with jumping on to the keyboard And if you're like, you talk about him every episode, I mean, first of all, he's hard to miss. He's like 20 pounds if you don't watch the footage or you've never seen a picture of him. Like, he is truly... Are you staring at me now? Gigantic. At this point, I need to redo the cover art of this podcast and get someone to talk about him. Or honestly, you could play a drinking game. Every time I talk about Matthew, take a shot. You'd be blackout drunk by the end of it. Depending on your tolerance. I think that's all for now. I will share a little bit about how I'm doing personally. My boyfriend and I found a bread maker in the thrift store for $5. Today we made homemade brioche bread in the machine. It is a high like no other. I am kind of thinking about going back to my farm to table phase. When I had that traumatic brain injury, I became really obsessed with going farm to table. I think I've talked about this before. Like, when my health was really out of my control and I couldn't control the fact that, like, one, I could feel myself getting stupider, and two, things were getting harder, and so I gravitated towards things that were easily digestible and made me feel like the world in its current chaotic state made worse by the facts. Remember, I got concussed in the midst of like the election result for the 2020 election, and then one of the first times that I think the first time I was permitted to watch TV again was January 6th. So I just really can't put into words how like the TV had been something, if you ever had a concussion, you know, that can be kind of difficult to watch. And I'd finally gotten to the point where like my eye movement and like my comprehension was okay to watch it. And then I was like, oh my God, we're in a coup. So then I started gravitating towards like femininity content and stuff. But one of the things that I really got into was like being super organic, and already having crunchy parents kind of made it worse. Like, growing up in an ingredient household at my mom's house where like nothing was ever really processed, and like if you wanted food you had to make an entire meal and everything was like readily sourced, like that, I'm telling you, already puts you down a very funny pipeline. Anyway, I'm not saying that in a way like I don't believe in vaccines. I just remembered how fun it is to be like, this is my locally sourced honey and I'm putting it in my homemade brioche bread with my Bon Maman jam. I'm kind of loving this vibe for me in spring of 2025. Anyway, that Wally YouTube video that I've talked so much about is coming out this weekend. I would love if you guys checked it out and gave me your feedback. Please check out the footage component on YouTube for this video especially. Technology is conspiring against me, or maybe technology is not conspiring against me. Maybe I can admit I don't actually know how to use the technology, but I appreciate you being here so much. It means so much for me. Thank you always for tuning in for me. Especially on like the silly ramblier episodes, sometimes it can be a little like, you know, am I not delivering what people want? So to really see that you guys ride so hard for these episodes as you do for like the super well researched, more serious ones, it really does mean a lot to me. Thank you for tuning in every Monday, Tuesday, or whatever day you listen. And until I see you again next Monday, mwah, love you, bye. 1%, we made it. See you next week.